Okay, so don't have a lot of time to go through this. I'm going to try to get through this as quickly as possible. So, the third Dreadix collection is based around the concept of spoopy, basically spooky and cute, and I'm going to jump right into it with my opinions on them. Starting off with, these are slightly out of order, Bete Gris, or Bete Gris. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. This is a short isometric or semi-isometric game where you play as a hotel front desk attendant who has to go around and clean up after the hotel guests, and a sinister force is stalking her. And anything else past that point I'm not going to say because this one has a nice little surprise. I'm going to go ahead and put this. I was thinking about uh, either C or B tier, but I'm going to have to think on this one. Hmm. Do I prefer it over? Hand of Doom did get slightly frustrating at times. Arcade Ultra had too much. Well, this game also has its fair share of frustrations. I'm gonna say, honestly, it's really a tie between B and C, but I'm gonna put it at the top of the C tier list, mostly due to having a surprisingly engaging story once you realize what's going on, and a fun twist on of mechanics about halfway to near the end. Um, it's a pretty straightforward game that does a nice job at building itself up before having a rather explosively fun climax, or as explosively fast paced as something like this can get. Um, there are some annoying aspects, though, in terms of how you navigate, in terms of what you can see within the isometric perspective. Sometimes some areas that you think should be accessible you can't quite access or can't quite maneuver around as well. The mini game involving the vending machines gets a little tiring after a while, and you have to be a little too precise. Or I don't know, maybe the button inputs aren't as precise as I was hoping, because sometimes I could have sworn I was doing it exact and it would be off anyways. But otherwise, this is a fun one. This is a this is a this is a fun one with a nice little twist to it. That's worth playing through just for that alone. Um, I love the art style too. The art style's very nice, sort of similar to like late '80s, early '90s. I believe the inspiration is for like Japanese PC releases, which suits it really well. It's a very cool looking game. Another game with a really great art style coming up that I also really enjoyed, but not quite enough to put it in the B tier list due to some frustrations, would be Bubo. Where is it? Where is Bubo? There it is. Yeah, Adventure on Gerald's Island. This one, despite some frustrating elements, I would say is easily right behind Bete Grais in terms of the C tier. This is basically a game where you play as a character that is going to an island and basically British, I believe if I remember right, it's been about a month since I played this, month or two. His ship breaks down, and then he has to go about the island trying to do menial tasks to get off the island. And again, no spoilers for this one. I like the sense of progression and build up for this one. I like how it plays around with the spooky and cute themes very early on, and throughout the entirety sort of sticks with that up until the very end where things do get rather creepy rather fast, but in a low-key way. There's no like jump scares or anything like that. And I believe this one also has different endings that I didn't get, which is also fantastic. I love that. Even with these short games that you get, um, this one is sort of like a platformer, third-person platformer. Having little extra endings is a nice touch. I love the art style. Love the art style reminds me a lot of like Tor with a sort of N64 inspired visual design. Looks really great. I do love the sense of variety in terms of environments that you have to platform around in, which isn't much, but it's there in terms of environmental design. With that being said, there are some rather frustrating elements, the biggest of which being how quickly Bubo picks up momentum, and then on top of that, how difficult it is to slow him down if you're in the middle of like trying to get to certain platforms in the game. I was stuck on this for quite a while trying to get to certain platforms, and in some other instances, I just gave up in certain specific sections of certain areas because of how frustrating it could be in terms of the overall momentum of the character as he propels himself forward for like jumps. But otherwise, this one is easily top of the C tier list. Solid title. And then there's Chip's Tips. This one is from the developers, if I remember correctly, of Hand of Doom. Um, am I gonna put this higher? Am I gonna put this higher than Bubo? Okay, I don't know about that. I don't know about that. I don't know if it'll go higher than Bubo. This is another one. All three of these are tied for B tier, but I'm gonna put them in C tier because they're still solid. Chip's Tips is a Blue's Clues styled. Think of a game from your youth that was basically like a very simplistic, like game made for children or preschoolers or preschool children. Only if it had a horror tone to it, a very twisted horror tone to it, and you basically get Chip's Tips. It's got a really cool visual aesthetic in terms of really trying to match that style of something like late 90s, early 2000s, semi-realistic, semi-fake children's shows where the character sort of moves around, but it's an outline of a real person interacting with um, a few real elements, but then it's mixed in with this very how do I put this, child-friendly environment. But they're almost like cutouts, so when you have to move into sections that are on a vertical plane as opposed to your plane, the horizontal plane, you do like a tilt and then slide across basically all the environments. It's really cute. It's really cute. It's surprisingly just charming and funny. And it's easily, I guess I wouldn't put it in the B tier simply because it's way too easy. Even compared to Bete Grice and Bubo, it is way... Hold on, 1 minute. Had to speak with someone. Okay, but basically very straightforward, incredibly easy, but does a very good job at creating an atmosphere. Despite the fact that it is kind of predictable, it's still a fun little conclusion to the entire story right at the end. It's just a charming and twisted take on old children's shows. I'm actually putting it ahead of Hand of Doom because while Hand of Doom is more original in terms of its concept for the mechanics, Hand of Doom also was a lot more, like, it's more challenging, but it's also more frustrating, whereas Chip's Tips is ridiculously easy, but not as frustrating to play. Again, I'm hoping with Hand of Doom, with the full release, that it's a lot more fleshed out, as I think that would be great. Hold on 1 second, checking stream quality. Just gotta make sure it's running. Okay. And with that, now we're moving on to two of... There's at least 5 or 6 games in this collection that are excellent and are easily worthy of top of the B tier or A tier, but starting out with possibly an easy A tier game. That's going to be hard for me to describe without spoiling it, but also just not going to be easy to describe in general is Disparity of the Dead, which I'm even going to go so far as to put it... Would I put it ahead of Outsiders? I may actually put it ahead of Outsiders. I'm not sure. Yeah, maybe. I love the Diving Bell though. I am gonna go ahead and put this ahead of Outsiders, which I know Outsiders has kind of held its position on these listings for quite a while, but Disparity of the Dead is a third-person platformer styled off of like PS1 horror games where you play as a undead. Well, You play as a dead detective, moving through the afterlife, interacting with people, other people who have also died, while collecting souls or soul energy to to get to the world above, to try to investigate what's going on in the world above, because there's a lot of indications that something isn't quite right. And I wish I could say more about this one, but honestly, this is another example of a game that's worth playing, that is absolutely worth playing all the way through. It has a great visual aesthetic. It has excellent controls, excellent camera controls, fantastic. The sound design in this one, of the few games thus far I've listed in DreadX Collection 3, has the best sound design. To the later portions, it is very effective. The only thing that's rather frustrating about this game is some of the camera angles. Some of the preset camera angles for indoor environments can be rather frustrating to deal with, but otherwise, it's a very straightforward and very simple game. Not much in the way of challenge, and you can't really die, because every time, if you do miss a jump and fall to your death, because you're technically in the afterlife, you don't really die, you just sort of reset. And that ties in very well mechanically, and in terms of mechanically with how the story progresses and plays out. This is a surprisingly thoughtful and touching game when it's not utterly terrifying. Which it very much, this is very much in the same vein as the Diving Bell to a certain degree, only a lot more abstract in terms of how it handles its psychological horror elements. Man, I want to talk more about that story, and especially the ending. And the ending is really the thing that stuck with me the most out of all of it. How it concludes is, it's really hard to put into words, but it's rather ingenious, and I'm going to leave it at that. If you do by any chance, for anyone watching this, play DreadX Collection 3, or if this one, much like with what I mentioned with the fruit with my 4th collection video, if this one's available separately, this one's worth playing easily. Out of I would say, maybe with the only other exception being one other one, this one is worth playing. And it very much scratched a personal itch with me in terms of my interests in horror as a genre that not a lot of other games in the horror genre can touch, except for maybe in terms of the DreadX collections, like the Diving Bell, the Fruit. I'll say more on that. And then another really solid one, and a very solid title that I loved, was Eden, Garden of the Faultless. This is if you've ever played Sonic Adventure 02 with the Chow Garden management and the mini games, this is like the Chow Garden if the Chow Garden the Chow Garden had a much more sinister intent behind it, where you basically raise these angelic beings, power them up, and then at the end, once you power them up enough, or you get certain ones with certain combinations and basically raise them, you win, so to speak. They become strong enough to accomplish their intended task, and their intended task is adorably twisted, and that's all I'll say on that. Again, another situation where I'm not spoiling how it plays out. Great visual aesthetic, in terms of it being sort of a mix between PS1 and N64 styled aesthetics. Fantastic sound design that seems like it was ripped straight out of late 80s, early 90s anime. Overall, really solid controls, for the most part. It is fairly straightforward, though, and it can get a little repetitive, such as if you're stuck in a minigame, you have to basically play out the minigame all the way through, if I remember correctly, which can get a little annoying, having to get through all of it, repeat it over again. It does get a little repetitive after a while, but the payoff is worth it, and it's worth it alone for the great mix of adorable and really unsettling aesthetic that it nails. It absolutely nails that aesthetic. So I'm probably going to have to say either B or A tier. Probably, honestly, for me, I'm probably going to go ahead and just put this one in A tier. And to be specific, I'm actually going to put, well, am I going to put it ahead of that one? Am I going to put it ahead of the Mansion for DreadX Collection 2, the overworld game? I don't know about that. It's definitely in the A tier, though. Definitely in the A tier. Loved it. And now we get to, ironically enough, they are back-to-back in terms of alphabetical order. My two, unfortunately, I'm just going to be honest, my two least favorite in this entire collection, starting with Matter Over Mind, which is a third-person platformer where you play as, it's similar to that game, I forget what it was called, Devolver Digital published it, where you play as a monster, you basically play as the monster, where you play as a small blob that can attach itself to people's heads and pilot them in order to basically escape. Yeah, Carrion. It's sort of similar to Carrion, but cuter. This one, unfortunately, I'm going to have to go ahead and probably put this in right behind The Thing in the Lake. Because The Thing in the Lake, on a technical level, is a sound game, but it was very frustrating to play, and I didn't particularly care for the story. Matter Over Mind has a cute little story, very straightforward, but the gameplay, unfortunately, isn't quite there. I found myself getting stuck a lot on different obstacles. A lot of times it's hard to really tell when the guards can actually, detect you and when they lose track of you. The biggest and most bizarre element, though, besides getting stuck in certain areas for the platforming is incredibly frustrating, but the other bizarre element is, you're playing as this thing piloting people, like grabbing onto their heads and piloting them around, and yet when you let go of them to move into other, locations or positions and just leave the dead body there, other guards and people basically won't react to it. There will be a dead person right there, and they will not respond to it. So it's also a matter of, at times it's way too hard, but then at other times it's way too easy and kind of illogical and nonsensical that the people in the environment around you don't react to you the way you expect them to. So yeah, this one, I couldn't wait to play this one after seeing the trailer. Hold on one second. Okay, sorry about that. Had to have another conversation, but yeah, Matter Over Mind. It's a really great idea, and it's got a great visual aesthetic. But I kind of hope this one gets remade at some point. I very much hope that this one's sort of ironed out and remade, or maybe considering how it ends, maybe as a follow-up game that expands upon the ideas already presented in the first game while fleshing out and fixing some of the more annoying elements of this game. Um, really was looking forward to playing this one. While it did fall short, it is still a fairly solid effort, and I came very close, honestly, to giving this like bottom of the C tier because I just love the idea so much. I just didn't enjoy the experience as much as I was hoping. And speaking of not enjoying the experience as much as I was hoping, Nice screams at Funfair, which is easily going smack dab in the middle of F. This is a first-person, I guess PS1 styled aesthetic game where you play someone who has been sort of forced into labor against their will to work at a fun fair in this sort of horror-esque dimension where you have to serve ice cream at a fun fair. And that's basically all you do. You work at the front counter. Well, except for the opening, which is just this long progressive walk to your job. Um, this one, I was practically pulling my hair out at this one. For one, it takes a really long time to actually get to the point where you need to go mechanics-wise, and then once you actually get there, not only was I suffering from some performance issues, but on top of that, the game is on a few occasions nearly broken. A lot of times when you have customers walking up to you and you're trying to interact with the ice cream to sell them, half of the time you can't even properly finish the order. You'll go to reach for something, grab it, and then sort of throw it, but you can't really like attach it. So you have to sort of throw it at the cup for the ice cream in order to fill it. But like about 75% of the time, about 3/4 of the time, trying to interact with the customer's order to get the ice cream on the order to them doesn't work. You'll just be tossing lobs of ice cream, and you'll be aiming right for it, and it won't do it. And that's basically what this game is for about 5 or 10 minutes. And then the customers just out of nowhere, even if you're doing well, the customers just get mad at you. Because something about, I think, an order, like something I think related, and that's just brilliant. Is it going to reconnect? Honestly, I shouldn't have even live streamed it. Wow. Is any of that going through? Is any of that going through? Okay. I'm going to try to get through this. I don't even know why I try sometimes, honestly. I'm not, if this live stream fails, I'm not redoing this. I'm not doing it. Okay. Reactor. Really solid, engaging, fun little game with a solid ending for its story. So I'm probably going to put this in... Actually, would it go in A tier? I'm going to put it behind Touched by an Outer God, but ahead of the Toy Shop, since it has less frustrating elements than Toy Shop. And then I'm going to put Sato Wonderland. Sato Wonderland is easily at A. This one is really rather revolting and terrifying and twisted, but has a solid story that has a great slow build-up. I'm going to put it behind Charlotte's Exile, though, because the gameplay isn't quite as strong as Charlotte's Exile. But this one, I'm not spoiling this one at all. This one's worth playing. It's sort of like a point-and-click adventure game where you have to input information and then get information outputted to you. Solid title. Soul Waste is an action platformer, third-person platformer style off of PS1 games, where you basically have to go around and unlock a tower to accomplish a goal. This one was solid, but slightly flawed in terms of character movement, the camera being somewhat frustrating at times, and it's a little too easy. But honestly, Soul Waste, I'm actually going to go ahead and put it behind Solipsis, but ahead of Arcade Ultra. I've sort of grown to really like that one over time. Hey, the stream's back. Okay, so because the stream is failing me, or I'm sorry, OBS is failing me specifically, I'm going to get through this quick. Best game in this collection, besides Disparity of the Dead. Disparity of the Dead is my personal favorite, but best overall game in this collection. Where is it? Spookware. Spookware, which Spookware at the Video Store. This is a short WarioWare style collection series of games where you basically play as a group of friends trying to get through scary movies. Very challenging, limited number of lives. This one is absolutely solid. I really, really liked this one. I'm going to go ahead and say, though, that it's right behind Outsiders, but it's still, like, mechanics-wise, it's still one of the strongest in all collections, in all of these collections, in terms of gameplay mechanics. Really solid, but on a few occasions frustrating mechanics. And I'm losing stream quality again. Okay, Submission. Submission is a great surprise that I won't spoil. It's a first-person game where you play as the one of these cute animals on a farm. Nothing else. I'm not spoiling anything else past this point. This one can at times be somewhat frustrating to navigate through and figure out what to do with it, but is otherwise a really excellent and very clever surprise. I'm not spoiling this one at all. Either look up YouTube videos or play it for yourself. And then finally, let me see, is it on here? I'm just going to go ahead and give my opinions on the hub game, which I've dubbed The Castle, which I would say is easily tied with probably the second game's hub game in terms of gameplay, and also in terms of storytelling, as my personal favorite. It's for me, it's a tie between 2 and 3's hub game, and then maybe the Hunt's hub game is right behind that. You basically play as a character from the first. You play as a character who has another character, without spoiling anything, inside of his head, and you go throughout this castle, basically committing to these activities that you have to perform in order to unlock all of these games. But at the same time, there is a very interesting and actually really heartfelt story of, I guess the best way I can describe it is, it's almost like a therapy session for an eldritch god. And it is surprisingly effectively written. It's not as complicated gameplay-wise as, say, The Hunt or as the second game's hub game, The Mansion, but in terms of writing and storytelling, I found this one, to me personally, to be the most effective. It's the most engaging. I don't really want to go into too many details on a personal level. It hit a lot of it hit all the right notes for me in terms of how it handles those aspects. And because